My name is Helen, and I'm 61 years old. I've lived alone in this quiet house in Northern Virginia for nearly 7 years now. My children are grown, both on opposite coasts with lives of their own. I've gotten used to the peace, the stillness, the gentle rhythm of mornings with tea and evenings with a book. I thought I was content. Maybe I was. Until last weekend. It was raining when he showed up, Mark, my late husband's friend from his university days. I hadn't seen him in well over a decade. We kept in touch here and there, holiday cards, an occasional birthday message, but nothing too personal. So when he called and said he'd be driving through Virginia and asked if we could catch up, I said yes without really thinking twice. I offered to meet at a coffee shop nearby, but he surprised me by asking if he could stay the night. Said all the hotels were booked due to some wine festival. I hesitated, but then agreed. I had a perfectly clean guest room, and he was an old friend. It felt innocent enough. When he arrived, the rain was falling in sheets. I opened the door, and there he was, older, of course, more silver in his beard, but that same easy smile. He brought in his overnight bag and the scent of fresh rain with him. We stood in the foyer for a moment, awkwardly shaking off the years with polite small talk, but soon found our way into the kitchen. I made tea. He poured a splash of whiskey into his. We talked for hours, sitting at the kitchen island, about my kids, his recent retirement, the places he'd traveled. I hadn't had a conversation like that in a long time, one without hurry or purpose. Just a flow of memories, quiet laughter, and shared silences. At one point, he reached across the counter to tuck a strand of my hair behind my ear. I didn't pull away, but I didn't respond either. Just looked at him. That moment passed, and we didn't mention it. Around 11, I showed him to the guest room. It's a cozy space, clean linens, a small reading lamp, and a window that faces the backyard. He thanked me with a warm smile, one that lingered a second too long. I said good night, closed my bedroom door behind me, and stood there for a moment, hand on the knob, heart strangely awake. I don't know what woke me at midnight. Maybe it was the wind tapping branches against the window, or the unfamiliar presence of someone else in the house. I reached for the glass of water beside my bed and froze. There were soft footsteps in the hallway, not hurried, not sneaky, just deliberate. I slid out of bed and opened the door quietly. The hallway was dark, save for the faint light spilling from under the guest room door, but it wasn't from a lamp. It was flickering candlelight. My heart beat a little faster. I padded toward the door and gently pushed it open. Mark was sitting on the edge of the bed, a single candle lit on the nightstand. He looked up, startled at first, then softened. I couldn't sleep, he said. Too many thoughts. I stepped inside, unsure of why I hadn't just gone back to bed. Are you okay? I asked, keeping my voice low. He nodded. Just being here again, in this house. It reminds me of him, of your laugh, of the way things used to feel. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, the candle casting shadows on the walls and across his face. I'm sorry if I crossed a line earlier, he said quietly, looking down. With your hair. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I stepped closer. You didn't, I replied. He looked up. I saw something in his eyes then, tiredness, yes, but also something tender, vulnerable, familiar. And I realized, standing there in my old robe, gray-streaked hair, bare feet on the hardwood floor, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't confused. I just didn't know what was supposed to happen next. That's when he reached out and gently touched my hand, and everything I thought I understood about loneliness shifted. I didn't pull away. For a moment, neither of us spoke. His thumb rested lightly on the back of my hand, his touch warm and steady. The candle flickered between us, casting a soft amber glow that made the room feel like it was floating outside of time. There was no past or future, just the quiet breath between us and the thrum of something unspoken. I sat down beside him on the edge of the bed. It's strange, I said. voice barely louder than the rain outside. How quickly silence can start to feel like company. Mark smiled gently, not breaking eye contact. "It's not strange to me," he said. "I think some silences are earned." We stayed like that, our hands barely touching. There was something comforting about the weight of his presence, something I hadn't realized I'd been missing until it was right there beside me. I'd grown used to the echo of my own footsteps, the solitary rituals of widowhood. But now I was noticing things like the softness in his voice or the way he leaned in just slightly. When he listened, he broke the quiet. "Helen, I didn't come here expecting anything, I swear. But being here with you again, it stirred things I didn't expect to feel." I exhaled slowly, unsure of what I was feeling. I looked down at our hands still connected. I don't know what I expected either. But whatever this is, it doesn't feel wrong. He nodded. "No, it doesn't." We didn't kiss. We didn't even move closer. Instead, we talked for hours. He told me about his divorce 10 years ago, how it was quiet, uneventful, how the love had just faded into the background like an old song. He talked about regrets, things he wished he'd said, the version of himself he sometimes missed. I told him about the first few years after Tom passed, how the house felt too big, how I started sleeping on one side of the bed out of habit. I told him about my fears of aging, of disappearing, of wondering if I'd already had my last new beginning. He listened like no one had in years. Somewhere between stories and silences, we shifted back onto the bedbacks against the headboard, shoulders gently touching. No urgency, just warmth. I leaned my head onto his shoulder, and he rested his cheek lightly on my hair. I closed my eyes. In that moment, I didn't feel alone. I didn't feel like a woman trying to reclaim something lost. I just felt present, safe, and surprisingly alive. Eventually, we both grew quiet, not from exhaustion, but from comfort. I stood up slowly, and he followed, walking me to the hallway. Just before I turned to my room, he reached for my hand again. "Thank you for letting me in tonight," he said, and I knew he didn't mean just into the house. I squeezed his hand gently, smiled, and walked back to bed. That night, for the first time in years, I didn't fall asleep to the hum of loneliness. I fell asleep thinking about the way his voice softened when he said my name. The next morning, sunlight filtered gently through the kitchen window, warming the countertop where 2 mugs sat still drying. I stood at the stove, waiting for the kettle to whistle, wrapped in a soft sweater and my thoughts. The quiet of morning felt different, less empty, more expectant. Mark walked in, hair still damp from the shower, wearing a simple gray t-shirt and jeans. He looked younger somehow, or maybe it was the way he smiled when our eyes met. "Smells like coffee," he said, voice rough with sleep. "Tea," I replied, pouring hot water into 2 mugs. "But I can make some if you prefer." He shook his head. "Tea's perfect." There was a pause, but not uncomfortable. We were both thinking about the night before, though neither of us said anything. The memory of the candlelit room lingered between us unspoken, but understood. I sat down across from him, cradling my mug. "Did you sleep at all?" I asked. He smiled a little, but I didn't mind being awake. Neither did I, but I didn't say it aloud. We spent the morning as if the night had never happened, chatting about music, the birds in the backyard, an old movie we both remembered. But under it all, there was tenderness. Every look held more meaning. Every word felt heavier. Around noon, he offered to help clean the garden patio, an excuse, perhaps, to stay a little longer. I said yes. We spent in our sweeping leaves, scrubbing the glass table, laughing over a stubborn wasp that wouldn't leave him alone. At one point, I caught myself watching him the way he moved, admired a bloom, smiled when he thought I wasn't looking. Then he caught me staring. "Helen," he said, brushing his hands on his jeans, "I need to ask you something." My heart thudded. Would it be strange, he continued, if I told you I don't want to leave just yet? I looked at him before answering. "No," I said, "it wouldn't be strange at all." He stepped closer, respectfully, and reached for my hand. I don't know what this is becoming or where it's headed, but being here with you, it feels like something I want to understand with you. No pressure, just quiet sincerity. I nodded. We stood there, his hand around mine, the warm breeze brushing past. Later that afternoon, we sat on the couch looking through an old photo album I hadn't touched in years, pictures of Tom. Our kids, us when we were younger. A wave of emotion stirred, but it didn't hurt. It just felt human. Mark put a hand on my back, not to fix, but just to be there. It grounded me. I smiled through misty eyes. This house has held so much, I whispered. Joy, loss, love. I didn't think there was room for anything new. There always is, he said softly. Sometimes we just need to open the door again. And somehow, I knew I had. That evening, we sat on the porch as the sun set, casting long golden rays. I brought out 2 glasses of wine. He smiled and we clinked them softly. The silence wasn't absence, it was presence. I used to watch sunsets like this alone, I said, gazing past the trees. Sometimes I talked to Tom. Not out loud, just in here. I tapped my chest. Mark looked over. Do you still? I nodded, but less often lately. He didn't press, just held my hand. I don't want to rush anything, he said, but I've felt more like myself these past 2 days than I have in years. I searched his face, no hesitation. You don't make me feel younger, Mark, I said. You make me feel real. And I hadn't realized how much I missed that. He leaned in, slowly. I didn't pull away. Our lips met gently, honestly. It wasn't a kiss that promised forever. It said, I see you. I'm here. We laughed quietly afterward, the kind of laugh that lets go of something old and welcomes something new. That night, he stood in the hallway, looking at the guest room door, then at me. Where would you like me tonight? He asked softly. I answered after a pause, not from doubt, but from reverence. Come with me, I said. We undressed, not just from clothes, but from years of fear, hesitation, and loneliness. We talked more, held each other more, slept with the closeness that says, I trust you. I'm not afraid to be seen. In the morning, he made scrambled eggs and toast. I stood in my robe, watching, and thought, I never imagined this would happen at my age. But maybe that's the point. Love doesn't follow timelines. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it circles back. Sometimes it shows up during a rainstorm, asks to stay the night, and changes everything. He left 2 days later, but not without a plan to return. We didn't name what we were building. We just promised not to close the door again. And I haven't, not to him, not to myself, not anymore.